Hi everyone, welcome back to Heartland Mamas. I'm Murri Briel,
I'm Heidi Henry.
coming to you from the Great Red Divide.
Welcome back. And today we have a really exciting podcast for you.
We're talking about media saturation, media exhaustion,
Media fatigue.
and what's the best way to approach as we move forward into the next election cycle.
Right. So many people reported during the last election cycle how tired they were of the media. And not just the 2018 blue wave cycle, but the 2016 presidential election. We know that we've got a dogfight coming up, whoever the dogs are, and that it's going to be a total saturation from every type of media, whether it is television, cable news,
Social media.
Yeah, social media. Oh, geez. And mailing flyers. We got a lot of that in our Illinois state election. We didn't get too many of the mailers for the presidential election because Illinois is traditionally a blue state, so we don't get a whole lot of attention. And Murri, this is a little segue from where we were going. This is why I'm in favor of abolishing the Electoral College, because whether you're blue or red, if you're a red voter living in a blue state, you have no voice. If you're a blue voter living in a red state, you have no voice.
And that directly affects local politics as well, and state politics, because if I'm not going to go out and vote for my congressperson because of knowing it's just going to go red,
right,
then chances are I'm also not going to vote for my governor, for my county clerk, for my county board member.
For your sheriff, for your school board.
And all of that filters down. So we have to find a way to become engaged. And I think that's a very good point.
Right.
There are many people who would love to make their voice heard, but they feel, why bother? It's not something...
Well, and I think that happens so often in these election cycles. The candidates spend all their time in the swing states. And Illinois is not a swing state, so we don't see anybody. Nobody,
very true.
Even now, gearing up to the first debate, we don't see none of the presidential candidates are really going to come through here unless it's by accident. So, and I don't care what side you're on, whether you're Republican or Democrat. We're not going to see the candidates here. We're not a swing state.
Well, I do believe, you're right, we won't see it as a swing state, but I think we're going to start to see other states become more in play. And that's because there have been so many laws that have been challenged and overturned about gerrymandering that we are seeing states that had been typically red because of the way they were designed now being cut more fairly. Yeah. So when you have a more fair state, well, that's going to change as well.
That does change. And I think I've told you a few times, there's three things that I would like to see in whoever becomes president in 2020. I would like to see the end of the Electoral College, because I feel that every American deserves to have their vote counted, to have it be important. And I want to see the end of gerrymandering. I think that gerrymandering, I don't care what side you're on, when we don't divide our populations fairly, people's voices are lost. We run very frustrated with our member of Congress who is absent most of the time, who doesn't hold town halls, who doesn't converse with us. But the district is gerrymandered in a method that allows him to win no matter what. And our party, the Democratic Party, doesn't give any money. There's no federal funds that come in for that. So you're just kind of on your own. And they've conveyed the 16th district over to the Republican Party, and that's it. That's what you get. And that's unacceptable.
So hopefully this new state legislator with a Democratic governor and will be able to make some adjustments moving forward
if they adjust it fairly
in 2020.
If they adjust it fairly, the thing is that it goes both ways. Gerrymandering is not just limited to the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. It goes both ways.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And the cuts are just as detrimental to every single citizen that votes. Everybody feels the gerrymandering. And the third thing I wanted to say is I would like to see an end of dark money. I don't want to see super PACs come out of nowhere
There's a bill on the floor to repeal Citizens United.
Well, the problem with anything that's in our House of Representatives right now,
It's never going to get through the Senate because Mitch McConnell is blocking everything.
he will never call anything. He has referred to himself as the Grim Reaper. So we are going to be in a stalemate, ladies and gentlemen, until after the 2020 election. That means no legislation is going to go through. It'll go through the House and then die in the Senate, or it'll be passed through the Senate and possibly die in the House unless it's a fair bill.
So that's a really good point that you just brought up, is that we have seen more legislation coming through the House. It's amazing.
100
We
plus
sat
bills.
for 2 years with nothing
Nothing.
happening, and we have all of this legislation coming through, which the Senate isn't willing to bring to the floor to consider.
Well, that's what I don't understand, is in those 2 years where both the House and the Senate and the presidency were all controlled by one party, but nothing was done. Nothing was done that could actually help the country.
Right.
So we had 2 years where you
Well,
could have,
it did help a certain population of the
Well,
country, a certain portion of the country.
Okay, we're gonna
not
say-
the average person, like,
the
us.
tax scam, which cost my small business about $30,000 in tax write-offs last year, which for a tiny business like mine is substantial.
So, as we're talking about these issues, it comes back to, I think, information.
Yes.
And where do we get our information from? We get our information from social media, from
Right.
articles, from news, and we have to start really evaluating what that media is and means.
Yeah.
And as we've seen the Congress or the House pass all of this legislation, that's coming out. But what I've noticed is on social media that while we're pushing out that this passed,
Yeah.
but the engagement is dropping. I'm not seeing them call your five, or make your five.
Well, we can't call our 2 senators because it's never gonna. Mitch McConnell will never call it to the House, to the Senate floor to be voted on. Somebody had asked me the other day about impeachment. Well, the House can impeach all they want. Mitch McConnell will never call it to the floor of the Senate. It will never get voted on, and therefore we're at yet another stalemate.
So, how are we going to get the information about what's really happening out there, and how are we going to spread news and information that is not clickbait or outdated articles or information that isn't current and relevant?
Well, not only isn't it current and relevant, but it can be salacious with the intent to harm.
Which is what we talked about last week. We talked
Yeah.
about how the terminology used for pro-birth is so negative, and how the whole point of it is to disenfranchise women to make things more difficult about control. It's the narrative. So,
Yeah.
like, we were talking about Donald Trump, and there was an article in Vox that talked about how Bayer has pulled out of Laura Ingraham and Tucker Carlson again.
I thought Laura Ingraham was pulled off of Fox News.
No. She may be for a bit, but she's back.
Okay. All right.
But a year ago, Bayer pulled out of sponsoring on Fox.
Yeah.
And in the last 2 months, they've started to advertise again with Fox. And we as consumers applied the pressure, which made them go, okay, well, we're losing business. We're not going to advertise for them. They got comfortable. They got complacent. We got comfortable. We got complacent. And they started advertising again. Now, the nice thing is the pressure once again was pushed on, particularly after Trump's interview with Laura Ingraham, and that in front of the cemetery, the World War II cemetery,
Normandy.
disparaging,
Oh, in Normandy.
disparaging veterans, disparaging war heroes, disparaging our legislation. Ridiculous. So they pulled out. The point is, they pulled out again, and they said that they're not going to do it. But the analysis of the article was, Donald Trump appears on Carlson and Ingraham so much. In the past, when you have someone, at any point, if you have someone who's a draw, they're going to draw for those shows.
Right.
You want to hear from them. he's not pulling the ratings himself. So his hateful rhetoric and people are becoming tired of and tuning out, which is great, but on our side, we have to push the envelope in the other way then.
I understand. And, Murri, you and I have talked privately about my anti-TV stance. I don't watch television. I have never watched MSNBC ever. Wait, I take that back. I watched a couple of the town halls.
No, Rado? No, Rachel?
No, I wasn't sure who she was until about a year ago.
Break my heart.
But here's my philosophy on that. I don't need anybody to tell me how to think. I'm a reader, so I would rather read.
Right.
And I will read, and I have subscriptions to newspapers. I know. I flip the pages and actually read them. And I'm really picky about what I read and what I listen to. And here in Illinois, we have WGN, which is our local superstation. And I will watch about a half an hour of that in the morning, and that's enough. I'm like done, I'm done. And with them, they're real pure. They've got a very pure journalistic quality. They don't
high journalistic integrity.
Well, they don't slant anything this way or that way, and in the morning it's kind of a fun show, but they do give the news, and it's pretty hardcore. And I figure I've heard it. I'm done. I could never sit in my house all day and watch TV.
No, I prefer to read articles as well, and then they'll have video clips for some of the media outlets, and I don't even like to turn those on. I would rather just read it because it's quicker.
And Rachel Maddow is the only MSNBC person I can name, only because I have clicked on a couple of things.
But that's another really good point.
Yeah.
Is we're talking about Rachel, and we're talking about MSNBC, and we talked about Fox. So we have all of these pundits that are telling us
how to think,
what to think. Back in the olden days, there was always a bias to media sources, always, but it was far less obvious and far less inflammatory than it is today.
Well, Walter Cronkite would deliver the news with great journalistic integrity. I briefly studied journalism in college and loved the fact-finding. I loved the factual reporting of giving people the news and information they needed to make a decision. But you have the staple of, you were talking about Bear, and I'll touch on that again, is that staple of Fox News is labeled not news, but entertainment. It's not labeled...
No, it's not even in the news category.
Right. And so when people tell me they watch cable news, I automatically think that they're watching... What was it? What was the channel where you could watch the congressional report? Was it CNN?
C-SPAN?
C-SPAN!
I love C-SPAN. C-SPAN, honestly, C-SPAN is probably one of my favorite places to get any news because it is still very boring. I mean, there's no sensationalism to it. There's no speculation to it. It's just facts. It's information.
Flat out. So C-SPAN I've watched. I haven't watched it in years, but I know I did turn on MSNBC and I watched some of the presidential debates. And even that, it's like you watch one person once or twice, and I'm good, and either you've said something I really liked, or you've said something that made me go, oh no, and that's just how I am. I think that when we talk about media fatigue, that's the reason I don't have it, because I cut myself off from it, and I do that with most television. I don't have a favorite TV show.
And I'm not a big television person. I think a lot of people have really moved away from television because you have things like podcasts, you have things like vlogs, you have such a greater access to information in different forms. And how many people are actually sitting in front of their TV? Most of the time you're filling in your day and checking and going, oh, this just happened.
Right.
You're not sitting down to watch the news, and then you don't need to by the end of the day.
I want to watch Tom Skilling do the weather. And then I'm good.
Right.
It's like, farmers, we live and die by the weather,
But that brings, that again, we're talking about the different networks, and we're talking about the different news stories, and and how I don't know. I have seen a drop in the resistance. I have seen a drop in followings. I've seen a drop in active, tangible work we can do. Maybe it's because we're sort of in this lull before the campaign season really starts.
Yeah.
But I know personally, I have a Democratic representative. He's a great guy, Representative Bill Foster, and I called and talked to his office and said, I support the impeachment inquiry.
Yes.
And there was an article just posted, which was talking to Ralph Nader, and he has said that there isn't enough call, that the congressmen aren't getting pressure from their constituents to do it yet, which means we're not doing our jobs. The way we let Bayer slide and not pay attention to who's advertising again is we're letting it slide. We've got all of this legislation going through the House, which is wonderful. We know it's not going anywhere in the Senate, but we still, 2 years ago and last year we were sending our MOCs countless messages and phone calls and emails, and we were on top of it because that legislation were things that we didn't want.
Right.
Now that we have things that we want but aren't happening, no one's taking that action, and we have to stay engaged and moving forward.
Well, and action and outreach is the cornerstone of activism. And when we were talking about, we had a deep conversation at Indivisible, which I'm very active in Grundy and LaSalle County in Illinois, about reaching out to people. And the conversation was just very, very much that. It's hard to keep people engaged when they realize that they are stuck with the same president. There's nothing we can do. That we're stuck with Mitch McConnell. There's nothing we can do. That we're stuck with the decisions of the House because that's not moving forward. That when you're just stuck in the mud, at what point have people given up? Have they, to me it's like, well, go get a bale of straw and put it down so we can get out, or some boards.
That's a really, really good point. People are stuck, and I remember feeling very stuck in that way back in 2017. When he had first taken in office, and the
hard times,
the lack of movement and the movement in the wrong direction. So I think you're totally right. Combine that with the clickbait and the sensationalism.
Oh my gosh, it wears you out. And I think that a lot of us in 2016 after the election went the way it did, and especially women, people like me, and I don't know if you've gone through it, that went through their own Me Too movement or their own Me Too time, saw the election going a certain way and realizing that we were going to go backwards. And
it was horrible.
It was horrifying to experience. It was like going through the Me Too issue again. It just brought it all right back to me, and thinking, I don't have a voice anymore. And back when it happened to me, there was no
there wasn't
law.
A voice.
There was no law said that my boss couldn't tell me that. Well, I wasn't promoted because I'd been married for 5 years, and they thought maybe I should start squeezing out puppies anytime, and they didn't want to invest any more money in me. And another time I was followed through a warehouse by a man that gave me the most obscene, he called it a poem, that he wrote for me.
Perhaps a little more limerick-like?
Oh my God, it was horrifying. I remember the paper falling from my fingers and I went right to my boss and told her that it was horrible, I couldn't take it anymore, and I was fired.
Oh, I know.
I was fired, for being sexually harassed on the job. That's what we had to live with before. That was our lives before. And to know that we had elected a president that didn't mind sexually harassing or groping, I've lived through that too. And going through that, it was exhausting. And the fact that we chose to resist, that we chose to speak out, that we chose to join together to try to make a difference, hence how I became involved in Indivisible. But we were talking the other night in Indivisible how difficult it is to keep people engaged when they don't when they don't see an end in sight.
They don't feel that there's something they can tangibly do.
Nothing.
But we're here to tell you there is something you can tangibly do.
You can.
Right now, you can make sure that if your representative, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, if you're watching and you happen to be in a blue area and you're blue, outstanding, your MOC may very well have not called for impeachment yet. They may not. There's only 50, I believe, who have come out.
Right.
So apply pressure. Mine's a Democrat. I applied pressure. We have to do those things. We have to continue moving forward, even if the narrative isn't going the way we want it to.
Well, and the thing is that we have a presidential election coming up, and we know unequivocally that Russia interfered with our election process. Russia, who we used to consider our mortal enemy, literally, in every single way imaginable.
For like the last, I don't know, ever.
They had told us that they would come in and we would invite them in and sit them at the table. That they would come in and conquer our country without ever firing a shot. They are here, people, and they interfered in our election process. Now, whether that was enough to change the election outcome, we, the people, need to make sure that it doesn't happen again. I don't care if it falls the same way again.
Now, we can say that Twitter has taken a pretty active stand on limiting the... All right, let's say they have attempted, I would say, let me backtrack. Of all the social media platforms, they have done the most and been the most active as far as trying to curtail illegitimate information, trying to curtail hate speech, particularly.
Just last week, they decided they weren't going to promote alt-right speech anymore.
Right.
Which, I'm thinking, do you really have to research this to say that you don't want it on your media?
You do, because, think about it. The wild, wild west, right, is social media. And it's evolving as we're evolving.
Yeah.
And because of social media, we are far more media savvy as people, but we're also easier victims. And I think we've seen such a strong push for people evaluating their sources and not sending out articles that are out of date or too old or sensational, that don't contain any real viable information.
Yeah.
And that's helped a lot. But without that sensationalism, I think we're seeing a drop in the engagement and where we're going. So my thought is, as I'm talking to people and interacting online, one of the things I'm noticing is that if you mention the T word, Trump, because, I is a bad word too, people instantly become defensive.
Right.
They instantly become angry and because they feel even if they don't like him, they feel that anything you say against him is an attack on them. Personally.
And he's been really good at advancing that message.
And we were good. As Democrats, we did a great job of saying he's a grifter, he's a con man, we're giving him these characteristics, which we all know he has, but that's shutting people down, that's pulling people away.
Right.
So instead of saying, Trump charity stole money from children's cancer research, instead of saying that, you say, can you imagine a charity that gives money to children who are fighting cancer, and that charity is siphoning hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars away from that charity for personal interest? Mm-hmm. I doubt very many Republicans are going to go, oh, that's a smart idea, huh? They're going to go, that's ridiculous, that's BS.
It's terrible.
Well, guess what? No, it's you say Trump, and they're like, what? It goes to the same thing as the Obamacare. So as they were trying so desperately to repeal Obamacare when we were campaigning, we would hear so often, oh no, that Obamacare's got to go, but I like the ACA. I want to keep that. I want to keep my protections. How many times did you hear that?
Oh my God.
Countless times I heard that, or people making comments about how they liked what the ACA had done, but they didn't want Obamacare. So it created this visceral reaction, and that's the same thing we're going through right now with Trump. You say Trump, and people think we are attacking him personally, and they take it personally. If we talk strictly about the instances that are going on, without using individual one or Trump, I think we'll get a lot farther.
Well, and changing how we speak about things can help, but I don't think it would help get people more engaged in activism, because that is a very hot button word. You know, it's a very,
You're right,
it's
absolutely.
a trigger word, and we see that with people. I saw it on my Facebook feed yesterday. Some of my friends got into a huge disagreement regarding that word and the implications of racism and totalitarianism. And, you know, being the kind of person I am, I just kind of step back and let it happen and let them fight it out. But to me, the discussion, as long as it's factual, fact-based, and is clean and doesn't resort into bullying or being cruel to someone or profanity, I'm fine. You know, debate it out, talk it out. But the one thing I noticed is that they were not talking to each other.
They were talking at each other.
They were talking at each other, and I had to go in and make some clarifications, because, you know, I don't mind if this discussion ensues, but if you're going to do it, you have to do it in a manner where you're discussing the topic. You're not just discussing your talking points.
Actually, which I think may be a help to address it in just general terms. Yeah. And I also think that, you know, Heidi, you made such a great point of, it's when you desensationalize it, like I've been talking about, taking out the charged emotion of Trump,
right,
and the charged emotion of traitor and individual one. How do we keep that enthusiasm and excitement for making change if we don't have that anger? And that's got to be a shift we make internally. Yes, anger can drive us,
right,
but it's only going to take us so far. I think we need to take our anger and make it more about caring and about change and about, you know, yes, Trump is a racist, homophobic, horrible human being, but he's not the one who created the alt-right. And he's not the one who you know, he did outlaw them being on the terrorist watch list. That was pretty bad. But the point is there's a lot more issues that we need to address about us as a whole,
right,
and we need to find a way to do that without the sensationalism and the
without
anger.
the fighting. I think that was the thing that struck me is, again, we have one part of my friends fighting with facts and the other one fighting with emotion, and they're not talking to each other. And where I fall on the side of fact, it's emotional to watch people get beat up like that. But when we talk about, you know,
your supercharged language, and
yes, the supercharged language, and that's exactly what it is. And people who,
that's how Trump gained so much popularity, was that supercharged language.
Yes.
Using terms that the average Joe would. I don't know about grabbing him by the pussy. I don't think I've ever said that, but, you know, it was his mystique.
Do you know how many Mexican Americans I know that are not rapists? They're not drug dealers.
Right.
They're just hard-working people. I've never met one that, you know, none of my friends that are Mexican have ever harmed a soul. They're such wonderful, hardworking people.
So we have to find a way to navigate that, to stop the sensationalism and take and get anger at the issues, get anger at the root of the problem.
Yes.
Take our anger away from Donald Trump. We know he's an idiot. We know he's a moron. We know he's not doing anything. But we have to turn what he stands for and attack those issues on that basis.
And I think that, you know, when I was canvassing door to door, and I'm going to use Lisbon, Illinois, because Lisbon, Illinois tends to be a very red little area. It's a little area north of Morris and just into Kendall County. Mm-hmm. And we walked Lisbon. I know, I love Lisbon too. So we knocked every single door in Lisbon 3 times. And one time we came in and we were talking, it was the day that John McCain died. It was the day after, and that they had, the flags were returned to full staff from half staff in less than 24 hours. And
I remember that.
Yeah, and I was knocking on the door of a veteran who had told me last time that he was a Republican and would never vote for a Democrat, and that happened. And he was hurt and ashamed of his president and so angry. And I thought to myself, it took him that point.
To get to where he was
He
angry.
wasn't upset
and
that children were being taken
Nope.
from their parents and locked in cages. He wasn't upset that the constant discussion on reducing nutrition benefits for children. He wasn't upset about the $1 trillion
taking away the
increase.
opportunities for veterans to have housing, to have pets, for PTSD. Yeah.
Yeah, those didn't bother him. But boy, that flag was a huge issue. And I thought, if that's what it takes,
Then that's what it takes.
then, and for some people I talked to, I talked to somebody today who was upset that the Junior and Eric had gone on a pub crawl in Ireland, had visited, I don't know, like 11 taverns and never paid their bill. And he's like, how could they go, these pubs, I've been to Ireland and I've got Irish heritage and they didn't pay their bill and I'm outraged.
They
I'm like,
never pay their bill.
They never paid their bill. And I thought, well, I don't know why you would expect them to suddenly pay their bills. They're the people that have siphoned the money. Those two were in charge of the money for the cancer research that they took, and I don't know did what with. But
Really expensive.
if you're going to
Donald.
take money away from children with cancer, you're not going to pay your pub bill either in Ireland. This isn't a remarkable different idea. This is just how they are.
Right. And yes, is it frustrating? Sure. But, the media I'm betting there were countless sources and countless feeds and everyone talking about how the Trumps bailed out on their bill. They didn't pay their bill.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but none of that. They do it all the time.
They do it all the time.
We knew he didn't pay his contractors before the election. We know he doesn't pay. We know he's bankrupt. We don't need to keep. That's not news to me. What's news to me is the fact that he took his entire adult children on a state trip that we paid for. That's news. But the fact that they scaled out on their pub bill, it should be a blip, and that's it.
Well, in the same
we can't
end,
focus on that. We need to focus on
the legislation.
Yeah.
We can't focus on the $130 million we've spent on golf trips. We can't focus on the fact that they didn't pay their pub bill. We can't focus on the fact that
because it's happened. I see these articles and on social media, and this really kind of gets me going. Is it'll be, all of this outrage. Can you believe that he, peed on a grave of a fallen soldier?
Oh my
I don't know.
God.
He probably would. He hasn't.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
don't quote me on that.
Thank you.
But something horrible, and it's like, yeah. Honestly, if you've been paying attention at all, nothing he does should surprise you.
Nothing.
And we really shouldn't care at this point. We just need to make sure that we get him out. And how are we going to do that?
How are we going to do that? And I've gone on record saying that he's going to be a one-term president. I don't care who runs against him. I think unless Russia interferes again, I don't see this person being reelected because he doesn't have American values. Anybody who values Vladimir Putin over our own Department of Justice is somebody I have a huge problem with, and you should too. You should too. We've talked many times about D-Day personally, and the fact that our president is a draft dodger, and he surrounds himself with draft dodgers that were too smart to be drafted. And I think about my own father and what he went through and the anxiety. My dad's 97, and he's a World War II vet, and he has a lot of PTSD to this day from the things that happened to him in his early 20s. He can't get over it. He'll never get over it in his lifetime. And he's frankly afraid to die because he's sure he's going straight to hell from having to kill people in war. And we don't understand, and we don't value and embrace the soldiers that we've sent over to anything from Normandy to Fallujah, and understand that these are people that are deeply scarred and will always be scarred. I see that in my dad. But I remember him being hospitalized when that march happened, the Unite the Right march where that woman was killed, and him being so taken aback and so hurt that, number one, the KKK was being vaunted by our president and the Nazis. And he said to me, Heidi, our family has a long history of patriotism and fighting in wars to protect the integrity of our country. And here he said, you have 17, he names these people that died in the Civil War fighting for Ohio and Indiana and Illinois. and he takes such great umbrage with the Stars and Bars being flown because, we had 17 people die in our family trying to protect this union. And I said, well, Dad, it was almost 750,000 people that died on our soil over that. And having it become something where it's commonplace to see that done in Illinois, where you see the Stars and Bars flown, or a Nazi flag, or the KKK being vaunted, and you see this veteran. I see this old man that is just crushed that he saw his friends die, give up their lives. He knows our family history of people that have died fighting for our country, to preserve our union. And yet people will go around and fly these flags and make these symbols and think that it's okay. That's not okay. That is never okay.
So focusing on not what he says, but focusing on what that actually means.
Right. What does that, that should mean warning. That should be a warning to all of us. I
remember being in high school and grade school, high school, college, and always for rhetoric classes and hearing, or argument for philosophy classes, when you hear never, always, definitely, anything that's a definitive type of word, take it with a grain of salt, because they want you to focus on that instead of focusing on the bigger issue, like the racism in this country, like the systemic subjugation of voices, of women, of LGBTQ. That's what they want us to focus on, and instead of the underlying issues which cause us these things. Well, I hate to go. Our time is up, or else you guys will stop tuning in.
We didn't really even get into the fact that we have people who are suffering from major media fatigue. And if that's you, if you're just tired of media, tune into the Heartland Mamas, because we'll give you all the news you can use. And tune off everything else.
Absolutely. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook at Heartland Mamas, MAMAS. And we are launching our YouTube channel tomorrow with this fabulous podcast. We're very excited. And we're going to be linking it to some other things to look forward to. A lot of really exciting things coming up. Again, I'm Murri.
I'm Heidi, and thank you for joining us.
We appreciate your
share. Please share with everybody you know, so we can.
Any feedback, we are more than happy to listen. So reach out to us, and we would love to hear what you think.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great week. We'll see you in a couple days.
Take care now.
Bye-bye.